A night journey through Navajo country. All of her life, Frances has seen things, heard things, and felt them. Born into a family of sensitives, this was actually what they considered normal. In my family, we were considered odd if you didn't experience abnormal things. We never talked much about our experiences and our feelings about them. We just accepted them as normal, which in fact, to us, they are. But nothing could have prepared her family for what they encountered on a dark, desolate road in Arizona 20 years ago. It was a mysterious and traumatizing event that haunts them to this day. Frances's family had moved from Wyoming to Flagstaff, Arizona in 1978, shortly after her high school graduation. Sometime between 1982 and 1983, 20-year-old Frances, her father, mother, and her younger brother took a road trip back to Wyoming in the family pickup. The trip was a vacation to visit with friends in and around their old hometown. The only member of the family that was not present was her older brother, who was in the Army and stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Route 163 took them through the Navajo Indian Reservation and through the town of Kayenta, just south of the Utah border, and the magnificent Monument Valley Navajo Tribal Park. Many strange things happen out there. Even my friend warned us of traveling through the reservation, especially at night. The trip to Wyoming was uneventful, but the trip back to Arizona along the same route was very different. Frances said, "It still gives me goosebumps. To this day, I have major anxiety attacks when I have to travel through the North Country at night. I avoid it at all costs." It was a warm summer night, around 10 p.m., when the family was 20 to 30 miles from the town of Kayenta. It was a moonless night, so it was pitch black. All they could see was just a few feet beyond their headlights. They had been driving for hours, with Frances's father at the wheel, and the vehicle's passengers had long ago settled into silence. Frances, along with her father and mother, were sandwiched into the truck's cab, while her brother enjoyed the night air in the back of the pickup. Suddenly, her father broke the silence and said, "We have company." Frances and her mother turned around to look out the back window. Sure enough, a pair of headlights appeared over the crest of the hill, then disappeared as the car went down, and then reappeared. Frances commented to her father that it was nice to have company on this stretch of road. If something went wrong, neither vehicle and its passengers would be alone. Thunder began to rumble and lightning streaked across the dark sky. Her parents decided that her brother should get into the cab before he got soaking wet from the rain that was sure to come. Frances opened the slider window and her little brother crawled in, squeezing in between her and her mother. Frances turned to close the window again and noticed the headlights from the following car. "They're still behind us," her father said. "They must be going to either Flagstaff or Phoenix. We'll probably meet them in Kayenta when we stop to fuel up." Frances watched as the car headlights crested another hill and began its descent until they disappeared. She watched and waited for them to reappear, but they didn't. She told her father that the car should have crested another hill, but it hadn't. Maybe they slowed down, he said, or he even suggested that they had pulled over. That was possible, but it just didn't make sense to Frances. Why in the hell would a driver slow down, or worse yet stop, at the bottom of a hill in the middle of the night, with nothing around for miles and miles? You'd think that they'd want to keep sight of another car in front of them, just in case something happened. So Frances kept watching, turning around every few minutes to check for those headlights, but they never did reappear. When she turned to look one last time, she noticed that the pickup was slowing down. She turned back around and looked out the windshield, and that's when she saw that they were rounding a sharp bend in the road, and her father had slowed the truck down to about 55 miles an hour. From that point, it seemed time itself had slowed down for Frances. The atmosphere changed somehow. It took on an otherworldly quality. Frances turned her head to look out the passenger window, when her mother screamed and her father cried out, "Jesus Christ, what the hell is that?" Frances didn't know what was happening, but one hand instinctively reached over and held down the button for the lock, and the other tightly grabbed the door handle. She braced her back against her little brother and held firmly onto the door, still not understanding exactly why. Her brother was now yelling, "What is it? What is it?" Her father immediately flipped on the interior cab light, and Frances could see that he was petrified. I have never ever seen my father that scared in my whole life. Not when he came home from his tours in Vietnam, not when he came home from special assignments, not even when someone tried to firebomb our house. Frances's father was white as a ghost. She could see the hairs on the back of his neck standing straight out like a cat's, and so was the hair on his arms. She could even see the goosebumps on his skin. Panic was filling the small cab of the truck. Frances's mother was so frightened that she began to shout in her native Japanese in a high squeaky voice, and she frantically wrung her hands. Her little brother just kept saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." As the pickup truck sped around the bend in the road, Frances could see that the shoulder dropped off deeply into a ditch. Her father slammed on the brakes to prevent the truck from swerving into this ditch, and as the pickup was slowly coming to a stop, something leaped out of the ditch at the side of the truck. And now Frances could see clearly what had started the panic in the first place. It was black and hairy, and it was eye level with the passengers in the cab. If this was a man, it was no man that Frances had ever seen. Yet despite its monstrous appearance, whatever this thing was, wore man's clothes. It had on a white and blue checked shirt and long pants that looked like jeans. Its arms were raised over its head, and it was almost touching the top of the cab of the truck. The creature remained there only for a few seconds, looking into the cab of the truck as they rolled past it. Frances could not believe what she had seen. It looked like a hairy man or a hairy animal in a man's clothing. But it didn't look like an ape or anything like that. Its eyes were yellow, and its mouth was open wide. Although time seemed frozen and distorted in this moment of horror, it was all over within a few short minutes. The headlights, her little brother coming into the cab, and then seeing this thing. By the time that the family reached Kayenta for gas, they had finally calmed down. Frances and her father climbed out of the pickup and checked the side of the truck to see if the creature had done any damage. They were surprised to see that the dust on the roof, the side, and the hood of the truck was undisturbed. In fact, they found nothing out of the ordinary. No blood, no hair, nothing. The family stretched their legs and rested in Kayenta for about 20 minutes. The car that had been following them never showed up. It was as if the car simply vanished. They drove home to Flagstaff with the cab light on and the doors securely locked. Frances said, "I wish I could tell you that was the end of the story, but it's not." A few days later, around 11 p.m., Frances and her brother were awakened by the sounds of drumming. They looked out of his bedroom window into the backyard, which was surrounded by a fence. At first they saw nothing but the forest and the fence. Then the drumming grew louder, and then what appeared to be 4 men appeared behind the wooden fence. It looked as if though they were trying to climb the fence, but couldn't quite manage to bring their legs high enough to swing over. Unable to get into the backyard, the men began to chant. Frances was so scared, she slept with her little brother that night. Sometime later, Frances sought out her friends, hoping they could offer some explanation for these strange events. They told Frances that it was a skinwalker that had tried to attack her family. Skinwalkers can shapeshift into animals. Her friends told her that the fact that a skinwalker had attacked her family was quite unusual. One of Frances's friends told her that it had been a long time since she had heard of any activity about skinwalkers. Frances took her friend back to the fence where she had seen the strange men trying to climb in, without explaining what she saw there. The woman considered the scene for a moment, then revealed that she thought that at least 3 to 4 skinwalkers had visited the house. She said that they wanted the family, but could not gain access because something was protecting them. Frances was astonished. Why, she asked. Why would the skinwalkers want her family? Your family has a lot of power, the woman said, and they wanted it. Again, she said that skinwalkers usually don't bother non-natives. Later that day, she blessed the perimeter of the property, the house, the vehicles, and her family. We haven't been bothered by skinwalkers since then. Then again, I haven't been back to Kayenta. I have gone through other small towns on the reservation, even at night, but I'm not alone. I always carry weapons and my protective amulets. A skinwalker on the reservation. I decided to join my best friend Karen for a 3-day stay at her grandmother's place on the res. Her grandmother lives near a place called Tuba City, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere, but surrounded by rural homes. We go to college together, and I was kind of interested about the Navajo tradition. The first day we stayed, it was pretty chill. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. But her grandmother said that a stray dog came out of nowhere and wouldn't leave. We went outside to look at it, and to me it did act strange. It was really big and really ugly. It had a black shaggy coat, and it looked like a mix between a German Shepherd and a Labrador. Her grandmother tried chasing it off, but it wouldn't leave. We went inside and tried to ignore it. That night, we were watching a movie in the living room. The room had big windows that looked out to the front of the home where the cars were parked. We had the curtains pulled wide open. My friend's grandmother was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and we were watching a movie. Next to the window, there was a medium-sized bookshelf where the DVDs were kept. Karen went to put the DVD back that we had just watched, but she freaked out because that stray dog was staring at us through the window. It was standing on top of the wooden box under the window. Now that's not something a normal dog would do from my point of view, or hers. Usually my dog, which is in the house, scratches the door to be let in. Res dogs aren't house dogs, and dogs inside houses are frowned upon in Navajo tradition. They should be outside as they are meant to protect the house and the family inside. The other dogs seemed to stay away from this scruffy black one. Karen opened the door and yelled at it to get off the box. It ran off and hid behind the shed. After we finished the movie, we went into Tuba City to get some groceries, and then we came back to the house. The weird dog was nowhere to be seen. My friend's grandmother had went to visit some friends, so it was just Karen and I. At around 5 o'clock that evening, we heard someone trying to open the door to the house. Both of us went to the window and looked outside because we didn't hear a car pull up and there were no dogs barking. When we looked out the living room window to see who was at the front door, we were shocked to see this strange dog trying to open the door with its paws. It had 2 paws wrapped around the brass doorknob, and it was standing on its hind legs. I thought that was weird, but I wasn't really freaked out. But Karen was. She opened the door and chased it off. Later on, when her grandma came back to the house, Karen told her what had happened. And Grandma didn't like what she heard. Later that night, we got ready to go to bed. We both slept in the spare bedroom because it had 2 beds. It had 1 window and the curtains were open slightly. We turned off the lights, but there was a sound coming from the top of the roof. We could hear this weird pitter-patter sound that sounded like footsteps, and there were scratching sounds and what sounded like panting. We also heard what sounded like barking, and as it grew louder, the other dogs in the neighborhood seemed to be barking at this thing as well. And then all of a sudden, something was running around the outside of the house barking. But this was no dog. This barking sounded human. It sounded like a deep male voice barking, like it knew that we knew it wasn't a dog. And then we both started freaking out. Karen decided to open the curtains to take a look out. And there once again was this stray dog, standing on its hind legs looking into our bedroom. There was a strong, foul odor, and we noticed that there were 2 black holes in its neck, and its paws were deformed. They looked like hands with overgrown, thick, sharp fingernails. Karen's grandmother came running through the door, and she saw it as well. The first thing she did was grab some ashes from the fireplace, load shells into the shotgun from under the bed, bless herself in Navajo, and went outside to shoot it. She was yelling at the thing in Navajo, telling it that it wasn't welcome here and that it needed to get the hell out of here. The next day, They called for a medicine man. The medicine man said that the dog was a skinwalker. He also pulled a piece of human skull out of Karen's grandmother's right shoulder. It was pretty big, about 2 inches long and about a centimeter thick. I can tell you now that I wouldn't have believed any of this had I not seen it for myself. But I now believe that skinwalkers are real. A humanoid with horns, claws, and bat wings. John from Salt Lake City, Utah couldn't wait to share a mind-boggling encounter he had recently heard about. He started by mentioning the infamous Skinwalker Ranch in Utah and how he has a close relative who is known as a UFO expert in that area. Since childhood, this relative has shared spine-chilling tales with John, and as a result, he has personally visited the ranch on multiple occasions. John told me about his most recent trip to the ranch last spring, saying that nothing peculiar happened during his visit. He and his friends roamed around the different areas of the ranch without any unusual incidents. However, the following Saturday night, something extraordinary took place, and his relative passed the story on to John. He said that a group of young Native Americans were driving a huge truck that was almost 8 feet in height towards the entrance gate to the ranch. As they approached, they noticed an orb of light emanating from the window above the gate. Frightened, the driver revved the engine to the truck, and the orb intensified in brightness. Astonishingly, the orb then soared over the truck, and inexplicably, something struck their vehicle. Terrified, the group retreated, and they drove about 3/4 of a mile down the road, where they stopped to check the damage on the truck. Strangely, they decided to swap roles, the driver now becoming the passenger, and vice versa. Now this is where the story takes an incredibly unbelievable turn. Out of nowhere, a creature suddenly materialized and yanked the young man who had transitioned from the driver to the passenger out of the truck. The creature tossed him around like a rag doll, repeatedly biting him in the thigh and clawing at him. Miraculously, the kid managed to scramble back into the truck, while one of his friends captured an image of the creature on his phone. Understandably scared out of their wits, they sped away and drove straight to the reservation police department to report what had happened. But disappointingly, the officers claimed that their hands were tied, although they were well aware and acquainted with the bizarre occurrences at the Skinwalker Ranch. The next day, the group contacted John's uncle, requesting that he investigate the matter. At the same time, a shaman's wife, who happened to be there when the incident happened, was blessing the traumatized youngsters. When John's uncle arrived at the scene, he had the opportunity to view the photograph of the creature on a cell phone. Additionally, he examined the damage the creature had done to the truck. The word "die" was scratched into the paint on the side of the truck. He also took a look at the injury sustained by the young man that had been snatched out of the truck, which included bite and scratch marks. For John, these details were utterly inconceivable. Unbelievably, just a few months ago, while working at a hospital, John treated the shaman's wife. She corroborated the account provided by his relative, recounting the incident with even more intricate details. According to both the shaman's wife and John's uncle, this creature in question was extremely tall, as it was able to hold the young man outside the window of his truck. The creature had horns, red hair, and a face that resembled a human, but it was distorted with a wolf-like mouth. It also had huge claws and bat-like wings. Naturally, John's burning question was whether this creature was a skinwalker. However, both his uncle and the shaman's wife confirmed that this entity was something entirely different and was definitely not a skinwalker. So from there, the mystery has only deepened. Snake-eyed creature, February of 2014. 3 mountain bike cyclists were making their way along the challenging 17-mile Old Pablo racecourse just east of Tucson. The course is apparently a grueling one, with a dry, withered landscape to traverse. Packing water and food is a necessity for anyone who wants to make it through alive. At around the halfway point, They came across something that none of them expected to see in the sun-blasted Badland. One of the witnesses would later say of their encounter, "We had been riding for about, maybe 9 hours, taking breaks every now and then. And then Michael says he needs to stop for a minute. We were waiting for him to finish when all of a sudden, we see this long figure walk across the trail. He was about 6 feet tall, very, very skinny, and had a very awkward gait, like a monkey or a man with a disease. It was almost robotic. And then all I remember is Michael saying, 'What the hell is that?' or something like that. But he sounded so far away. He probably used a different word instead of hell. But the thing is, we had somehow walked a little ways towards this thing. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was to take a better look, not knowing what it was. But this creature stopped and it made eye contact with me, and I could see him clearly. The eyes were kind of like a snake, but black and with a yellow stripe in the middle of its eyes. And it had green and red scales on the face and head. The red color was kind of like the same as the desert sand there, and it looked like it was almost a sandy texture as well. It didn't have a nose, only 2 slits where the nose should be, and I couldn't see any ears or hair. It had a red mouth that looked like it had blood around it, but it didn't look like it was bleeding. It looked like some sort of a pattern. It reminded me of a chameleon, but it also looked like a person too. This odd creature then stood up to its full height, and it raised its long arms as if it were trying to make some sort of gesture at us. All the while, it was making an unearthly chattering sound before it scampered off like a lizard trying to hide. The men all excitedly talked about what they had seen and what they were going to do, but they decided to keep going and finish the course. However, the strange encounter did not leave them, and none of them would ever forget it. One of the witnesses would later say, "When you read these stories online or watch them on television, well, you think people may be crazy or on meds or something, or they're just in need of attention. But this has made me a believer. There has to be a lot more of them out there. If there's one, there's got to be at least 2, right?" I know most people won't believe a word I said. That's the way I used to be. I don't blame them for it at all. But they are out there. Not saying that this is some alien or chupacabra or anything like that. And all I'm saying is I've never seen anything like that before in my life. But I'm no biologist, so what do I know?